this on. I've participated in about half a dozen of these from Quincy down to Madera County. Today I'm just going to focus on kind of a general overview of kind of the forest condition and how plants have responded to change over the last 100 or so years. A little bit about my background. I've been with the department for about 15 years and have covered a lot of different things. Although Richard generously described me as a botany specialist, I rarely get to do botany. I'm usually doing project review for Caltrans. Previous incarnation had me doing timber harvest review. I participate in regional planning. I've done a lot of other things in the past as well. I just thought I'd throw up a few other things to let you know that Richard's description was close, but not quite. I do get to practice botany from time to time, though. Usually it is folks within the office bringing bags of stuff in various stages of decay for me to identify for plot lists. Things I'd like to cover today is basically, why our forests look like they do today and what they probably look like once upon a time. I will dip in a little bit about, as we proceed with some of these fuel reduction efforts, what's happening, what are these changes that we're doing, and how they affect plants. What are these changes doing to create a different physical situation for the plants up in generally the mixed conifer forest. And then I'll do a brief summary, although I'll probably be out of time by then. Fire as a factor in certainly the western landscape has been recognized for quite a long time. Here's a quote from the early 1900s recognizing that fire has been an important factor in shaping the forest, and even clearly today it's still an important factor. In fact, today it's probably more a matter of a lack of fire that is such an important factor in the forest landscape today. In fact, the lack of fire has created this rather undesirable forest condition that's standard throughout the entire state and probably throughout the West. To give you an idea of how significantly the change is in patterns of fire in California, one only has to look at the last 100 years of change. Going back, pre-1900, fires were pretty common, not strictly from natural ignition sources such as lightning, but perhaps more commonly through Native American fire. They would have been lighting fire for a variety of reasons and very commonly. And their fuel treatment of the land probably shaped the landscape that the pioneers first saw. You can see that in some of these forest types, the return interval of fire has increased, tenfold or even greater. So because return intervals have increased so much, there's going to be some kind of change going on out there. Among the changes that are, pretty easily observed are changes in species composition. The previous fire condition that was out there encouraged a more open forest with a lot of sunlight striking the ground, which created opportunities for a lot of annual plants to come in. A lot of shrubs were present there, and certain species particularly were missing. is another rare plant of El Dorado County. This is El Dorado mule's ears. This plant will lie dormant underneath the canopy of chaparral until burned over. After burning, it'll resprout, and the second year after the fire is typically the year where most flower heads are counted within a certain patch. After that first couple of years after a fire, you rarely see any flowers. This plant will just exist more or less in a vegetative state. Woolly violet, this is one of the ones I kind of have a little bit of an issue with in the way that it responds to disturbance. This plant was formerly thought to be highly rare in California, and it was a priority plant for conservation. You look for this thing in forests and in unmanaged landscapes, and it's very difficult to find it. But you go out to these big mesas referred to as clear cuts, and lo and behold, this plant is quite common. So it was downgraded from a high priority sensitive, please protect this species, to a more common, this plant needs disturbance in order to thrive. Likewise for Red Hill soaproot. This is a plant, its distribution wasn't well known in the beginning. They thought, in the very beginning, thought it was endemic to serpentine and gabbro soils. They started finding it more and more off of these soil types, and off of those unusual soil types, they found that it responded quite well to disturbance. I've seen this coming in areas where shrub layers have been removed by hand, where there has been mastication, and in this case, which is the one that I'm kind of most humbled by, almost embarrassed to admit, this site was clear cut over. It was hit with herbicide, and then deep ripped by heavy equipment to prepare for replanting after a timber harvest. And I don't think I've ever seen a population that is so dense as the one at this site. In defense of the timber company, this population was so much higher than this plant had ever been seen before. No survey was done looking for the species. I don't know if they would have found it looking for it, but regardless, it responded extremely well to this horrible treatment. All right. Along with opening up landscapes for plants to thrive, fuel reduction, you got to keep in mind, doesn't completely mean fuel elimination. These things that you see in the images, this is all fuel, and some of this is actually quite beneficial. Whether it's large woody debris or snags, fuel managers often want to see this stuff gone. These fuels can burn quite a long time. But I lost my train of thought, sorry. These woody materials can remain on the landscape a long time and provide a lot of benefit for many different species. Going back to my vacation last week down in Sequoia National Park, I noticed a lot of rotting logs on the ground, and they were often torn up. I wasn't quite certain what was tearing them up until one of the trails we actually saw a black bear working the logs. He ignored all the people that seemed to be in the area, but he's really intent at ripping apart the logs, perhaps finding termites, beetles, and ants. The snags, again, as I mentioned before, leaving snags on the environment is very important for wildlife. Fire managers view them differently. They view these as structures that could be throwing embers and casting fire further ahead of the existing flames. So there's got to be some sort of balance. Wildlife managers are going to see more of these. Fuel managers might want to see less. When they're on the bottom left, the one titled Structural Diversity, that site's been masticated. You have a lot of trees there. They didn't leave a lot of shrubs. In the background, you can see what the landscape looked like in the past with a lot of shrubs and younger trees, but trying to keep some sort of habitat elements in there for all species is important, keeping in mind whatever your overall goals may be. Looking at Mike's question here. Greater fire frequency would be less large woody debris and fewer snags. Not necessarily. If there's a higher fire frequency, it'd probably be burning through with lower intensity and less likely to ignite the large wood. Time for another trivia question. The plant in the image here is Pacific madrone, and here's a poll. The madrone is related to which of the following plants? The magnolia, blueberry, eucalyptus, or ash? Okay, let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and close the voting on this and broadcast the results. Here we go. Boy, it looks like folks are evenly split. Nobody thought this thing was an ash tree at all. About a third thought it was a magnolia, a third thought it was a woody blueberry, and a third thought eucalyptus. Let's see. How do I move this? Okay, thank you. Looking at the flowers, you'd find the madrone is actually quite closely related to the blueberry. The rest of the plant might not be very convincing, but the flowers, as you can see in the image, are pretty convincing. So congratulations to those of you that chose B, blueberry. So what's going to happen after a fuel reduction treatment? In a moment, I'll go through a couple of the standard treatments, but just looking at some of the overall goals, usually, or results, you're certainly going to look at fewer trees. The ones that are remaining are probably going to be, on average, larger diameter. You're going to remove ladder fuels. Ladder fuels are basically younger trees and tall shrubs that can carry fire from the ground up into the canopy of a forest. This is considered an important component to target because oftentimes in fire situations, fire is driven by fuels on the ground. And so by removal of these ladder fuels, the fire will actually just kind of creep along the ground and miss out on the canopy. So you can continue to have fire in the landscape without having significant impacts on the mature trees in the landscape. By treating the fuels, you're going to remove the shrubs. You certainly, if at all possible, want to keep quite a few of them remaining because they provide a lot of food and cover for many species. There's going to be less woody debris on the ground, and there's going to be a reduction in leaf litter. Again, this all depends on which method you're going to be choosing. Let me give an example of some of the fuel treatment types. First, we have mastication. Mastication, for those of you that haven't seen this in operation, it involves heavy machinery equipped with either a rotating drum or a blade head that essentially serves as a giant cheese grater on the landscape. It can reduce trees, usually maybe less than 12 inches in diameter, and shrubs and small woody debris into shredded wood chips like you see in the foreground. Although it doesn't remove the fuel from the landscape, it changes the profile. All of the heat, the potential heat energy is still there. It's just now in an 8-inch thick layer on the ground that will be decomposing over the next several years. So the positive there is that you've opened up the area and reduced the ladder fuels. The negative is you now have a very thick litter layer that may prevent seed germination. Shrubs will probably continue to resprout through this, and any bulbs that occur in the landscape will probably be able to pop up through the the material there on the ground. But seedlings may not have much of a chance in that thick material. Another standard method is thinning. The pictures here are actually from a commercial timber company's property. I believe this is Soper Wheeler. There on the left, you've got an image of an untouched forest. It's probably 60 years old. You can see a few relatively large diameter trees that are probably in the 18 to 20 inch range. Quite a few maybe in the 12 to 18 inch range, and then numerous trees under 12 inches. It's pretty much a closed canopy. You don't actually see a lot of shrubs growing underneath because it's so densely shaded. Just down the road, this isn't the exact same site in the after picture, but it's just 100 yards down the road. They went out and marked trees to keep and took everything else out of there. And so what you have now are just larger diameter trees, again, the probably stuff over 18 inches, and all the smaller stuff is gone. What has changed? There's going to be much more sunlight hitting the ground, and fewer ladder fuels to run fire up into the canopies. Also, it's difficult to tell from the image, but a lot of the woody debris was also removed, and because it's really only the kind of the naturally occurring litter layer from the leaves, it's probably going to be a thinner duff layer than mastication, and therefore allowing better opportunity for seeds to emerge. Another fairly typical treatment is going to be fire. Fire can be cost effective. It can cover a lot of acres in a relatively short amount of time. You have the benefit of returning any plant material there directly into nutrients for the soil. You'll be stimulating seeds to germinate. You'll be stimulating shrubs and trees to sprout. Bulbs are going to come booming out nicely after a fire. This right here is what will most closely mimic the natural condition. This right here is a spring burn. A fall burn would be even better. However, one of the big drawbacks is timing. Getting people out on the ground to do this, monitoring fire weather is very dicey, and this is generating smoke, which many communities find undesirable. Thinning or fire, it's not a one-shot deal. You don't just do it and walk away. It's like a lawn. You mow it one week, you got to come back again and do it again. The benefit with a forest situation is it doesn't come back overnight. It will start coming back immediately, but maintenance operations probably only have to occur about every 5 years or so. Again, can take out the smaller trees, remove brush patches if they get into a dangerous condition or an undesirable condition. The natural, and again, thinking about 5-year